want to start today with a little metaphor about video games. Oftentimes in video games, at least nowadays, you'll have either a difficulty setting or a choice of pathways. Most of the time there's a clear choice which one's easy, which one's probably the normal route, and which one's going to be hard. But sometimes it might seem easier just to take the normal path, the path that most people are probably going to end up choosing. And while sometimes this will get you to the end, sometimes it won't. The game, like even the original Doom, insulted you for beating the game on easy mode and told you to go back and beat it on normal or hard like you were supposed to. So this idea that sometimes what's popular and what's easy doesn't always turn out well in the end. But sometimes the harder, more difficult paths can actually give you a little bit more reward. And this brings us to today's quotation. What's popular isn't always right. What's right isn't always popular, by Albert Einstein. And that we can take this to mean that sometimes it is better to go against the grain than with it. And we can see this today through three examples. First, the horrific acts of the slave trade. Second, former Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain. And finally, Olympic athlete Dick Fosbury. So first I want to take a look at the slave trade. The slave trade was not a good thing. There were thousands upon thousands of lives lost to the slave trade, and those who survived had to work most of their lives away on Southern American plantations. But at the time, this was considered normal. Though there had always been people who spoke out against slaves, most people didn't. They took it as normal. They took it as what had always been, because they were right. It had always been that way. But just because it had always been that way, and everyone, or almost everyone at the time, supported it, doesn't mean it was a good thing. Just because people used slaves for work doesn't mean they should have continued to. It made them money, sure, but was it really humane? So, even though everyone decided to do this, and most southern states made their money off of slaves, it wasn't the good thing. It was the popular thing, but it certainly wasn't the good thing. So, we can heavily tie this back to today's quote. Though it was popular, it certainly wasn't right. So, this brings us on to a similar topic of Neville Chamberlain. Neville Chamberlain was the Prime Minister at the start of World War II. And he practiced appeasement with the German army. Germany wanted a bunch of land from surrounding countries, but they probably shouldn't have had it, and even the Treaty of Versailles said that they shouldn't have had an army that large. But rather than challenge them on it, Neville Chamberlain decided to let them take the land. Rather than fight, he just said, why not let them have it? So, this practice of appeasement, believing that if he gave the country what they wanted, then Germany would just stop. We know this didn't work out. We can see that because Germany already had some land at the start of World War II, it just made World War II so much longer and so much more bloody than it could have been. But Neville Chamberlain didn't want to ruin his image by starting another war immediately after World War I. He thought that if he challenged Germany, it would spiral into this big war that he didn't want because he thought it would ruin his public image. He was doing what was popular by not starting another war because, to be fair, most people didn't want another war less than 2 decades after the other one had ended. But, so he decided to just let Germany have what it wanted. And this did not work out well. Though he couldn't have known that appeasement wasn't going to work, we can see that it certainly didn't. So by trying to protect his own image rather than do what he should have done, it just made World War II one of the longest and bloodiest wars in the history of the world. So we can see that by doing what was popular, he actually cost people thousands of lives. Finally, I want to end on a more positive note and look at Olympic athlete Dick Fosbury. Dick Fosbury was an Olympic athlete who specialized in the high jump. The high jump was simple. Just jump over a bar. Most people before Dick Fosbury did it the way that you'd think to, jumping forward over the bar. But Dick Fosbury thought that that wasn't the most efficient idea. So he decided to try jumping backwards over the bar. And it worked. He got better height off of jumping backwards with slightly less effort. So by jumping forwards over the bar like most people had done, there was nothing necessarily wrong with it, but it just wasn't really optimized. It wasn't perfect. It could still be improved upon. But by jumping backwards over the bar, Dick Fosbury was able to gain more height and therefore improve his score. So, the fact that he decided to willingly go against the grain and try something new, it actually paid off in the end. And his idea to jump backwards over the bar is still being used today because he decided to take a risk and do something that most people weren't doing. It was definitely popular to jump forwards over the bar because that was the only way anyone had ever done it. So when Dick Fosbury decided to jump backwards over the bar, it certainly wasn't popular, but it turned out to be a much better idea. So in conclusion, what's popular isn't always right. What's right isn't always popular. And we can take this to mean that sometimes it is better to go against the grain than with it. And we saw this through the slave trade, which was thought of as normal at the time, but was actually a horrible atrocity. Neville Chamberlain, and his wanting to preserve his own self-image, which eventually made World War II an even bloodier war. And finally, Dick Fosbury, who decided to go against the grain and actually wound up perfecting the high jump. So, though oftentimes it might seem easier to take the easy route in the video game, because oftentimes it is easier, as the name suggests, it isn't always as rewarding. And sometimes it can honestly hurt you and just waste your time, like in the original Doom. So if you want to have a better experience, even though it might be harder at first, try picking the hard, or maybe the normal route. Thank you.